How Mainstream Media Can Be More Accessible to Neurodivergent Audiences by Rachel Worsley. 10 Years of Ali Bites 2022.
Hello everyone, my name is Rachel Worsley. I'm the founder and CEO at Neurodiversity Media, a company that produces evidence-based resources to help unleash neurodivergent people's potential in the workplace. I wanted to start by telling you about my story as to how I got interested in the digital accessibility of information for neurodivergent audiences. In 2018, I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD at the age of 25. After a lifetime of not understanding myself, I finally had answers for a lot of things in my life. I had an explanation for why I struggled to pay attention to videos because they were not my preferred way of consuming information with my interest-wide brain of ADHD. But of course, there are other people with ADHD who are different, and I know many who do enjoy videos. However, one of the strengths of ADHD was the ability to hyper-focus on an area of interest. And for me, that was research papers. I spent hours combing through them online, but they were so heavy in jargon and hard to read online. But they were full of interesting findings, such as how to do project management via ADHD. But they weren't presented in a format that was easy to understand and for the average user. So I set out to create an online resource library where I created resources in visual and written formats with the hope of expanding in audio and video to create content across all formats so that people can consume the information in their preferred learning style. We also leverage social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn to create content that is contextual to the platform. Hundreds of people, from neurodivergent people to their support network and their employers, access our platform to learn more about neurodiversity in the workplace. So why did I tell this story? Well, here's an explanation about neurodiversity. This term was coined by Australian sociologist Judy Singer. It is a sociological tool to acknowledge diversity of minds, which includes people with conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and Tourette's. I often call it the most inclusive D&I movement because we've all got brains and minds. According to the UK Advisory Conciliation Arbitration Surveys, over 15% of people in the UK, that's almost 1 in every 7, are neurodivergent. Worldwide, the number has been estimated to be around 1 in 10. There are not too many hard statistics, but it's clear that we are a large population of people around the world that cannot be easily ignored. And that brings me to mainstream media. The reason that Neurodiversity Media has started was to fill a gap in the mainstream media's lack of digital accessibility for the neurodivergent audience about the evidence-based information about themselves in the workplace. So how can mainstream media improve the accessibility to a neurodivergent audience? Well, here's a couple of basic suggestions that are based on Neurodiversity Media's own experience. Firstly, create more visually distinct news content on visual-friendly platforms such as Instagram. Of course, this focus on visual content has to be balanced up against the main accessibility challenges of the platform, such as captions, image descriptions, and alternative text to describe images for those that are blind or low vision. None of the mainstream media platforms comply with these basic accessibility practices in a consistent manner at this stage. Nonetheless, according to research, 65% of the world are visual learners, and mainstream media platforms are still underutilizing platforms like Instagram to convey the news in a way that's accessible, engaging, and relevant. About 1 in 10 people are dyslexic, and visual content is an excellent way to engage dyslexic people that wouldn't otherwise be possible if it was the written word. A Reuters Institute report had found that Instagram had overtaken Twitter as a source of news, so there's definitely a platform that can't be ignored. So here is an example of how mainstream media could consider kind of framing a situation where there's a topic that's very topical, such as mental processing time. And here we decided to just tell the story through graphics, just easy to understand, built from Canva, where it's about how to give an autistic worker mental processing time. As you can see, there's a woman with a thinking cloud with the 3 dots and an hourglass there. And this is really a representative of kind of many struggles that autistic workers face in the workplace. And if we just scroll through the story as this example, we heard this is Ashley's story, an autistic woman who was looking for more mental processing time at work. And here is how her workplace helped to accommodate her requests. We have a woman here with a battery at a very low charge. It says at the beginning, most of the challenge is related to energy levels, but I could have said something. That's the first one. Second one, woman sitting down, she's thinking, I was struggling to get the amount of mental space I needed to process information before responding to questions or approaches. We recently had a chat about mental processing time, woman sitting down at a computer looking at a Zoom screen. I often need a little bit more time than other people to stop and think, and that pause can sometimes be misinterpreted. Woman is thinking with the three dots. The people involved thought I was being helpful, but I didn't understand what was going on. And there's a woman sitting down with her hands crossed over, hunched over. There's a woman with a green arrow going to the left and an orange arrow going to the right. And it's really just a mismatch of communication styles. So we sat down as a group and worked out ways of how we can meet each other in the middle. And number 7, a banana and a phone. We came up with a safe word. If we want someone to give us space in our team, we say banana. And if we're in a client-facing space where that wouldn't be appropriate, we turn our phones over on the table. And then we find out that this person is actually Ashley McKay. She says supporting autistic differences in the workplace isn't it hard? It's a mindset. And she's got blue hair with a green shirt and a purple jumper, and she's looking at the screen. So that's just one example, I suppose, of how mainstream media could be more accessible for neurodivergent audiences in creating visual carousels that can be placed on Instagram, they can be placed on Twitter, can be placed on Facebook, especially visual-friendly platforms. There's ways that they can be more accessible because people feel more represented, and that's kind of key. When you include neurodivergent people in these stories, that's how people feel like they can access and engage with the media. And another way that you can use visuals or you can use accessible content is creating checklists. So in this case, there's a communication checklist. It's about how have you clearly communicated the nature of the work or job roles? Do you use a guide on communication style preferences? Do you ask your employees on how to prefer to communicate? Do you have an option of communication preferences available for meetings and performance reviews, etc.? Do you offer employees a chance to turn video off on video calls or allow use of the chat function? And there's a yes score out of 5. Serious work needs to be done for 1. 2, much more improvement is needed. 3, doing okay, but could be better. Number 4, almost there, but not quite yet. And 5, excellent job. And this is the type of content that, again, makes it more accessible for mainstream media to implement, because it's not just throwing out statistics. It's not just throwing out boring words or doom and gloom kind of news. It's actually a really practical resource that both sides, whether a neurodivergent employee in this case, or whether an employer can sit down together and tick it off, or whether the employer could do it first before sitting down with the employee and say, how can I help you? Because that's exactly the kind of media that is accessible. It's media that engages, empowers, and informs. So in summary, mainstream media can be more accessible to neurodivergent audiences by paying attention to content format and platform, and also the type of content that is presented, which is practical and relevant to the neurodivergent person, as well as other parties where necessary, such as employers. To me, that is the type of information accessibility that will allow neurodivergent audiences to better engage with mainstream media content that is online. Information accessibility is a big passion of mine, so I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Celebrating 10 years, AliBytes 2022.